So, speaking of team building, and so many of us live in very rural districts, and so where there doesn't seem to be as many resources or maybe team members. So, do you have any recommendations on how to find team members in more rural districts?
Yeah. Um, I have a big heart for this. I grew up in Big Clarendon, Texas, and so getting that whole feel of not there not being a lot of formal service, but I still think even in 2021, one of the great blessings of the smaller community is that we still have this real neighborly spirit. And and not only that, but in those smaller rural communities, everybody knows our kids. And so in many ways, they're much safer just because everybody knows them, everybody knows who they belong to and what they're supposed to be doing. And so there's a lot of benefit in that. And then in those smaller communities, that neighborly spirit, there's a great chance that people are just going to help just because. You know, there's that person that runs a store that might need somebody to sack groceries or sweep at the end of the day. Not to demean our kids, but those are jobs that many of them love to do, and you don't need any special program for that. You can just do that. Now the downside is the lack of some of those formal programs means that we may not have some of the more formal structures in place, like job training and things like that. But we look to find those people. And maybe it's that school teacher who has some vocational experience. Maybe it's that person in your church that has just done some things around training people to do jobs, and they may not want to take it on as a job, but they'd help your child learn to do this, and on and on and on throughout that, to where our kids have good social lives because they're part of that community.
Have you noticed in the world that we're in, this is 2021, have there been more virtual options for team building? Have you heard anything along those lines?
Um, we do a little more, and it can be easier in some cases. I have found that in most cases we just need the hands on. We might be able to connect to somebody that can ask us some questions and give us some direction in how to get connected to the formal services. Ultimately, we're going to have to sit down together and figure things out.
Besides, when I think about my kids, it's either I have the school and my pediatrician or family doctor. Who else should we even consider to be on our teams?
In adulthood, I'm looking for her boss. I'm looking for someone who would befriend her. Karen and I do marriage retreats for couples who have kids with special needs, and Haley has a list of about 6 people who, when we have a retreat coming up, she calls them and says, because she's humble, she says, "It's your turn to keep me this weekend." And they don't help at all because they say, "Haley, we've been waiting for so long for you to call us. We can't wait to have you." But they're on our team. They're on our team because they love her and they will do that for us. I wonder. So many of our parents struggle with respite care and getting a break. I wonder how many people would have a friend or two who would take their child, regardless of how much of a struggle it might be, just to give you a break. Where where if we were engaging team and building that team, that we would have it available. I think neighbors are great. I know of a number of families who have children on the autism spectrum, and occasionally they like to run, and everybody on the block knows them and talks to them and sends them home. But because family has done the work to build their team, nobody's panicking. Neighbors aren't scared or afraid, and and they help.
Speaking of respite and other things like that, but how do we find resources in our area?
So, um, Abilene is kind of the hub of y'all's area. As you go further east, you get to Fort Worth, and you find those things. But I think school is a great place to start because when you have people who have done this for a long time, they just have knowledge of things that are around because different families have engaged different services. The other thing is parents themselves. Um, One of the reasons we started the Haley Project over 20 years ago is because we were going to family meetings with Haley for school. And one of the things we noticed was that everybody was on this journey by themselves. And so there was very little sharing of knowledge just because you're so busy trying to figure it out for yourself. Where do you stop to go, hey, I wonder if this would help someone else? So finding those spaces to talk with other parents who are a little further down the road to, hey, what did you do? And we spend a lot of time, answering that question and saying, now this did not go well for us. And I'm not saying don't try it because it could go well for you, but this didn't go well, but this did, and just sharing the whole experience.